You are listening to From Ring to Veil.
I'm Shannon.
And I'm Kim.
And we are your wedding planning gurus.
We take the stress out
and put the fun back into wedding planning. Planning Budget Savvy Weddings, episode number 128.
We all know that DIY can save you money, right?
Yes.
But there are other ways to save money. And today we bring to you Jessica Bishop of Budget Savvy Bride. She's here to share some of her awesome secrets and tips on how to save money. But before we get to that, we got to talk a little bit about our Patreon page.
Our Patreon page. Yeah.
Yes. The way it works is if you want to pledge to send us some money, some cash, to help us out with this podcast, to keep us going, to help us buy Shannon a new microphone so that she can keep recording while we're
separated
states away from each other. If you want to help us with our hosting so that we can keep up hosting and keep up the good
giving
work.
you good information about wedding planning.
That's right. If you want to help us get to PodFest 2018.
To make us better.
Yes. I have heard so much good stuff about PodFest. I cannot say how much I want to go. I mean, it's not just a let's get together and party because we're podcasters.
Right.
It's an information filled convention. Yeah. It's just going to be awesome. So if you go to fromringtoveil.com/give, you will see our Patreon page there.
Right. And we have rewards if you give us a little bit of cash.
That's right. And one of those rewards we think is awesome. We think you'll think is awesome also. If you pledge $10, you will get a 20-minute Skype call with either Shannon or I or both of us.
Depending on if we can, get our schedules
how
together.
We can swing that.
Yeah. Since we're going to be states away soon.
But to ask us any kind of wedding planning questions, or even if you want to get to know us a little bit, we're happy to do that.
Yeah, we love to chat.
We thought if you just have a couple of questions that you want to get our advice on, we'll chat with you. Give you 20 full minutes of just you time.
Right.
So check it out from ringtoveil.com/give and think about it. Think about it. You could talk with us. All right. So now let's get to our recording with Jessica Bishop
of the BudgetSavvyBride.com. Jessica Bishop of the Budget Savvy Bride has been sharing tips and secrets since planning her own wedding back in 2009.
She has info for wedding budgets as low as $1,000. Jessica is here today to share some of those secrets with us. Welcome, Jessica.
Hi, ladies. Thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome. I'm so glad we could find some time to talk.
Me too.
Because you are on the east side.
Yes, I'm actually New York City, the Big Apple.
We're on the opposite side of the United States from you, in the Seattle area. So the way we always like to start out when we have a guest host is to ask you to tell us a little bit about your journey and how you got to where you are right now. Do you mind sharing that with us?
Absolutely. As you mentioned before, I got married in 2009, and I actually started my blog, thebudgetsavvybride.com, about 2 weeks after I got engaged in 2008. I was actually working for a local wedding magazine at the time, and so I was very much immersed in the world of weddings already, and I was seeing all of this beautiful inspiration that you would see on, the cover of Brides magazine and Martha Stewart weddings and all these things, and I was sitting there freaking out because my husband and I were, husband-to-be, were fresh out of college, working very entry-level jobs and weren't making very much money. And then to top it all off, it was the recession at that time. And so, neither of our families were in great spots financially. And both sets of parents kind of said, we're sorry, we don't really think we can help you financially pay for this wedding. And so I knew that we were going to have to get really creative in how we pulled this off. And I didn't really want to necessarily sacrifice on, having the people there who were super important to us and having that experience of having, a real wedding. And so I started the blog as a way to kind of keep track of my ideas and inspiration along the way. And over time, sharing my story and sharing my ideas and tips and projects that I was undertaking, the site just really grew a following. I think a lot of people were going through the same thing, and maybe they, maybe they did have money, but they didn't want to spend that much on one day. I know a lot of people feel that way. And so the site just grew really organically. And then after I got married, I decided to kind of pivot from making it, all about me and my life to making it more of a resource for couples to come to and get that information and inspiration and see how other couples were able to pull off a wedding on a limited budget. And so, like you mentioned, we have hundreds of real weddings on the site now. The site's over 9 years old, and they range in total cost from, $1,000 up to around $25,000 is usually the highest that will go. And with the national average being, over 30,000 at this point, like that 25,000 range, like is still considered a budget savvy wedding, especially if you're looking at like a larger, metro area like New York or Chicago or Los Angeles. So I think it's a really great resource.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely. And it's a beautiful website. I don't know if our listeners have been there yet, but it's really pretty. I know you've done a lot of work on it.
Thank you so much. I actually designed it.
Oh, did you?
I did. Yeah. My background is in graphic design. So that's what I went to college for. And I had a minor in journalism. And while I was working for that wedding magazine and I got engaged and I was planning my wedding, then I got laid off. So that made the already challenging budget even more challenging. And so yeah, it just kind of happened. And I think the website has now, become my full-time business, and it's a really great combination of, graphic design and journalism in a way. So
that's awesome that you can use what you love and do it every day.
Yeah, it's definitely a surprise, like I think back to school, and I'm like, thought about what my career would look like. I never would have imagined I'd be running my own business and basically, running an online magazine more or less, so it's really exciting, and it's a really creative job.
Awesome.
So we're just going to go right into the questions. Besides DIY, what are your 5 top tips for planning budget savvy weddings?
So my first piece of advice for couples when they're planning a wedding, no matter the size of their budget, is to sit down and figure out what that budget actually is. You really can't, stick to a budget if you don't set it first. And so I always recommend that's always step 1. That's always tip number 1. In terms of like ways to cut costs, really the smaller your guest list, the more you can save, or on the other side, the more the better experience you can treat your guests to, because the money will go farther when you're working with a smaller guest list. My third tip would probably be to, pull in resources from your friends and family. I am a huge, advocate for hiring professional vendors, but unfortunately it's not always realistic for couples, especially if they're on a really small budget. So utilizing the talents of your friends and family, whether that's, like myself personally, I designed all my wedding invitations and stationery and signage and all those sorts of things. So that really saved me money. I printed them at home on my printer. We had a family friend bake our cake for our wedding gift. And so that saved us several $100s there. So really just like think about the people in your life who can contribute in some way to your wedding to help you save money. I think my fourth tip would be to consider things that are maybe a little bit less traditional in terms of like decor items. You can get really creative and even upcycling is something that I really love. So I see a lot of couples, collecting wine bottles over time, pickle jars, baby food jars, whatever, spray painting them really beautiful, like metallic shades and using those as centerpieces. And they look gorgeous, but basically didn't cost you anything other than the spray paint that you use, you know, because it's all just stuff that you would throw in the recycling bin. So I really love sharing that tip. And then the fifth tip I would share is probably, you know, thinking a little bit outside of the box when it comes to your catering. You don't have to serve like a full sit down meal. You could, you know, do buffet style. You could do past hors d'oeuvres. You could get like really unique food items that make a bigger impact and are more memorable rather than just the same old, like, you know, chicken breast and green beans. You could get like a cool food truck and serve tacos, or, you know, have like a mashed potato bar or something like that. Just something that's a little bit more interesting and like interactive is going to make a bigger impression on your guests and doesn't necessarily have to cost you a ton of money either.
You just won Kim's heart with the mashed potato bar. Every time somebody mentions mashed potato bars or donut walls, Kim just...
Those are my two things, yeah.
Oh, yes. The donut wall is like so big right now too. It's awesome. I'm dying to get invited to a wedding that has a donut wall. And it's so great. One of our most popular weddings that we've ever published, I think it was last year, and they did a donut cake, and it's literally like one of the most pinned images on Pinterest, and it's a stack of donuts with like some flowers on it, and they're Krispy Kreme donuts. It costs them like $50, you know, for the whole thing, and it's beautiful. So I love it.
Great. Me too. Me too. Okay, so I have a question. I want to go back to the resource, your family and friends. You did mention that you are a proponent for, you know, vendors, for hiring vendors. Mm-hmm. What categories, I guess you would say, would you not use friends and family for?
I would say not to use friends and family for anything that's going to cause them to be really focused on that thing on the actual wedding day. You know, like you wouldn't want to ask your best friend or your dad to shoot the photos at your wedding because you want them to be able to relax and enjoy the day and spend it with you.
Right.
So I think anything that's like really heavy, you know, heavy lifting or heavy activity on the day of, I would probably not do. Mm-hmm. And then when it comes to anything else, it's really all about your priorities. You know, for me, I didn't place a big priority on, you know, the entertainment. My husband and I are pretty laid back. And so we were like, we can totally just set up like an iPod and we don't need to pay $500 or more for a DJ. Mm-hmm. And I've gotten many, many angry DJs leaving me comments on my Facebook page. And so, but in reality though, like that, it just wasn't important to me. And right. I don't think it made that big of a difference for our guests either. And so, and because we didn't spend that money on a DJ, we were able to put that money into other things like, you know, drinks for the bar or better food. And so I really think a lot of that is about prioritizing. But I definitely say if you can afford it, hire professionals because it's just going to make everything run smoother overall.
Right.
So you're saying if you were big entertainment people and wanted a big party and dance floor and all that, then you would have spent the money on the DJ and went somewhere else.
Yeah. I think a lot of it, you know, when it comes to any budget, whether it's your personal budget or your wedding budget, you're going to place priority on the things that are most important to you. And so whether that's the food or whether that's the entertainment, you know, you got to pick those maybe 1 to 3 areas to kind of focus on. And then everything else, you might have to make little sacrifices here and there. You might have to like forego the beautiful big peonies in your bouquet in order to afford something else, you know?
Right.
A lot of it is really about prioritizing and sticking to that budget that you set for yourself, because it's all well and good to be like, oh, this is my budget. But if you just get swept up in the moment and say, well, I want all the things, you know, you're going to go over your budget. You have to have a certain amount of like restraint.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
So our next question for you is, where is the best place to look or to buy or to rent decor? Or a few best places.
Yeah. So, I mean, I love sharing online resources because they're accessible to, you know, our audience, no matter where they are in the US. I really am a big fan right now of like Oriental Trading. They are expanding their wedding collection so much. I actually work with them to create content for their website and DIY stuff using some of their products. And they are just like killing it right now, honestly.
Wow.
Yeah, they have a lot of really great new things from like the cool like geometric terrarium style and vases and all sorts of great like table runners and things like that, votives. So I really love Oriental Trading, and their stuff is super affordable.
Right.
I really like, there's a website called Coil Wholesale that I like. They have some great stuff. Another one that I really like is Luna Bazaar. So yeah, there's a lot of different ones online that you can check out, but I honestly really like, and something I did for my own wedding was doing a lot of thrift shopping. So, of course this is, 8 years ago, but the blue mason jar thing was like a big new trend at the time. And so I knew I like wanted that for my, wedding centerpieces. And so I went to, the flea markets in Nashville where I lived at the time, and, collected a bunch of those things. So I really think you can, get creative and find ways to not spend a lot of money, but get those sort of looks that you're looking for.
I don't know. Do you ever, sorry.
That's okay.
I cut her off. Do you ever go to the buy sell groups on Facebook for weddings in your area?
That's something I feel like that has exploded in the last year or so. And I'm really only just learning about those myself. There's something too that I just heard of. In addition to like the buy and sell groups, there's a new thing that I just heard about called Buy Nothing.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the Buy Nothing project. And so people like, they just give stuff away or like share it. I don't really fully understand, but, it seems like there's a lot of trading and,
Yes.
Right.
It's like free passing things around going on. And so I think that's really cool. Just kind of like the whole sharing economy, is great, especially because as a bride, you might want, 100 gold chargers for your wedding, but are you really going to buy them all? And then what are you going to do with them afterwards?
Right.
You're going to start renting them out. So finding situations like that where you can share things, I think is really, really cool. So I would definitely recommend, searching for like the buy sell groups or the buy nothing groups on Facebook.
You can always tell when you go into a thrift shop, like right after somebody's wedding, because there's a whole shelf of the same type of thing on the thrift shops. They're all spray painted gold. They're like, yay.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you acquire top quality vendors on a strict limited budget?
I think, you kind of have to have realistic expectations when it comes to working with vendors. And one thing that I like to tell couples is, I know that a lot of, wedding experts or whatever advice books for couples who are planning a wedding say like, oh, negotiate with your vendors. But that doesn't mean like, hey, I want you to give me the moon for this small amount of money. That means say, hey, this is what I have to work with. What can you do within that budget? And kind of like expectation set what that budget can actually get you.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you're looking at a photographer whose work you like super admire and love, and you really, really want them to shoot your wedding, like you might not be able to afford, all 8 hours of coverage plus an album, plus an engagement session, plus, but maybe you could work out something where, you're like, this is my budget. Like, how many hours can this get me, and do things more a la carte. So I think a lot of people, will respond better to something like that than, saying like, oh, well, your price might be this, but I only have this. So do it for this, because people have expenses. This is a business, all those sorts of things. And so, when it comes to vendors, a lot of times it might just not work out, that you can't get that, what might be considered top quality vendor, within that smaller budget that you have. But I would say that, one good way to save is, Finding somebody whose work that you like, but maybe is a little bit newer and they are trying to build their portfolio. And as long as they have some sort of reference and some sort of, official contract, obviously you want to make sure everything's on the up and up, like you can get really, really great services by working with someone who's new and up and coming. So you got to find those diamond in the roughs. And I think just like with anything, it's all about doing your research, getting references, checking off, crossing the T's and dotting the I's, when it comes to that stuff, I think.
I mean, we all started from somewhere. Like I was a floral designer. And so I started off at the beginning. I was basically giving almost all of my stuff away for free because I wanted to build my portfolio and I wanted to get my client base set. And then, the years go on, you raise your prices because you're more qualified and things like that. So the realistic expectation thing is a good thing to.
I think research also, you hit a button there. Research, I would say don't see somebody and be like, that's it. I want that person. I'm going to get that person. And then be really disheartened when you can't afford what you want.
Right.
So do some research and find a few options. So I have a question. How do you feel about bartering?
I am totally down with bartering, actually. I think with anything like that, you definitely want to have some sort of like formal agreement or like contract in place, just so expectations on both sides are kind of like outlined. But personally, I did that for my wedding. So I worked part-time for my wedding photographer to pay off our wedding photography budget. So
why not? If you can.
Yeah. And I mean, like there are people who would say like, well, why didn't you just get a part-time job to earn extra money to pay for the photography? And I'm like, well, because at the time, like I don't know. It didn't make sense. She could have paid me and then I could have used that money to pay her, but in essence, it was the same thing. So, so that's how I handled it. So I'm definitely, if you can work those sort of situations out, like go for it. If you have a skill that you can offer or a service that you can offer in exchange, like why not?
And I think we don't think about that so much nowadays. Bartering your services, what you can do for what somebody else can do for you. And I think it's a hidden gem that, so I'm a hairdresser. I have my license. I can do somebody's hair for a year if I need to, in order to get what I need.
Absolutely. Why not?
Why not? What elements of the wedding would you encourage saving money on and then spending money on?
So my like general rule of thumb is to consider like every aspect through like this lens of, does this, thing that I'm considering spending money on affect just me, or does it enhance my guests' like experience at the wedding? And so I like to encourage couples to focus more money towards the things that are actually going to like enhance the experience of the day. So like personally, I just can't consider justifying spending thousands of dollars on a dress that you get to enjoy that dress and you're only going to wear it once. Like, doesn't that just seem insane to you? Like, I just can't get on board with that. So I like to say, like, don't spend all that money on a dress. Like, you can get a gorgeous dress on Rent the Runway for $100 and it's going to be, amazing. That's just my personal opinion. So like, I think the things that are more, but maybe this is just me being like a laid back person in general. Like, I just didn't feel the need to have that like big, this is my day, this is my one chance or whatever to wear, so to me, like the dress, things like that, like weren't as important. And then the things that I did care about were like having really great food and, being able to have a bar, because that was something that we didn't know if we could pull off, but we wanted to be able to serve our guests, drinks. And so, that was something that was important to us, and having like a venue that was outside and, provided like a beautiful environment. So those were kind of the things that were more about the experience of the day for our guests. So that was kind of, like I said, my rule of thumb, like thinking like, oh, I'm going to save money on the things that really only affect me and my husband, and then spend more on the areas that affect the event and the experience for the people who are celebrating with us.
Right. And always it always goes back to priorities.
Mm-hmm.
So
absolutely. I mean, if you have been dreaming about wearing this big fabulous dress for your entire life, and that is your one thing, and your husband to be, or spouse to be says, okay, if you want that expensive dress, like, we can do it, but we're gonna have to cut in this area. Like, maybe that means your guest list gets cut by a ton.
Right.
Maybe that means your wedding is super, super intimate, so you can have that amazing dress. It really is all about, like, your personal priorities.
Yeah. There are some great places out there to get wedding dresses that are gorgeous, but not so expensive. Like, J. Crew has an awesome wedding line, and they're not so expensive. And so, there's always places out there to find great dresses.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I see, like I said, Rent the Runway. I'm seeing so many brides renting their dresses. I'm seeing going for department stores where, like, they have, just white long dresses at, like, Macy's and Nordstrom and things like that. Like, you can get really, really beautiful dresses that are perfectly wedding appropriate, for $300 or less in a lot of cases. So, it just really depends on your priorities and your style and all of that.
So you said enhancing the guest experience. If your guests aren't happy, it's just going to bring you down too.
Yeah, I think you'd probably pick up on the energy of the day. So, I mean, I've personally never been to a wedding where I thought, like, oh gosh, this is horrible. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But because, I mean, when you think about it, like, the people who are coming to celebrate with you should be the people who care about you the most and who you care about the most. And aren't going to judge you for the decisions that you've made. They're there to celebrate with you because they love you. And so, overall, I think, like, it's going to be amazing no matter what. But
exactly.
Yeah.
So we've touched on food before, but how do you feed a large guest list on a limited budget?
Yeah, there's a lot of, options, I think, that tend to be more affordable. I see a lot of, like, pasta stations, because they can be, obviously pasta is very affordable. Being from the South, I grew up outside of Nashville. I saw a lot of barbecue. We did barbecue for our wedding, and it was amazing. We had mashed potatoes and macaroni and cheese and green beans and barbecue pork and chicken, and it was amazing. So things like that. I see a lot of, I've seen a lot of, like, even taco bars, you just kind of have to think about, like, what are the foods that are most affordable. I also really, really love the whole brunch wedding thing. And I've never been invited to a brunch wedding. I really want to go to a brunch wedding because brunch is my favorite meal.
Yeah.
I love eggs and pastries, and I love Bloody Marys and mimosas. Like, that sounds amazing to me. So, and breakfast food, all of that can be very, very affordable. So I think that's a great route to go as well. So yeah, I mean, I think it's, kind of like using some common sense about, like, what foods tend to be more affordable, or even thinking, like, what are our favorite foods, like you and your fiance, if you love tacos, or if you love, I love Mexican food. I keep talking about tacos.
Hey, nacho bar, come on,
right.
do that.
Right.
We participated in a wedding not too long ago. She had a really large guest list, and she had a fried chicken food truck, and she served, it was it was chicken strips, French fries, and rolls, and the sides. And I thought that was kind of cool. And they just served them basically in, like, a paper, like the red and white checkered paper boat.
Yeah. I love that, and it's so cute, and especially if it's something kind of like I was mentioning, like, if it's something that you and your fiance, that's, like, one of your favorite foods to eat, like, that adds an extra layer of, like, personality to your day. And so I really love those kind of details too.
So this wasn't a wedding, but my sister put on a graduation party for my nephew, and what she was able to do was get a taco truck. They dropped it off. They had the tacos pre-made with the meats. So there were 3 different options, and then all the fixings with it. And they just drop it off. It's still heated. Everything's you just lay it out, and it's kind of a make your own type of station thing. I thought that was fabulous. I mean, usually you would have somebody there taking the orders and all that stuff, but we just lined up and picked out what we wanted and went and ate.
That's awesome. I mean, people generally, like, as long as they leave not feeling still hungry and like the food was good, they're going to be happy. So
Exactly. Okay, so now can you have a sit-down dinner on a limited budget with a large guest list?
With a large guest list, that could be tricky. But I think with everything, going back to what I said earlier about like doing your research, like when I was planning my wedding, I had to look at, I was looking at 2 different venues. One was all inclusive of the rentals and all that stuff. And one of them was just a blank venue where I would have to bring in all the rentals. And when I really broke it down to each different itemized thing that I was going to have to bring in, I found out it was going to be cheaper for me to get that blank venue and bring everything in myself. Okay. So I think it's like the same, but that's not always the rule, obviously, but it's doing your due diligence and doing the research and really breaking down like the expenses on both sides. I think that, it depends obviously on the size of your budget when it comes to anything. But if you have a large guest list and you want to have a sit down dinner, just remember like that's going to be including, not only the food, but also the service, because when you're having a sit down dinner, you need more staff to come and serve that food. So it's an extra expense, but it really depends on, how much you have to spend. But if that's your priority, like I said, like you can pull from other areas to make it happen.
Yeah. That's another reason to have an intimate wedding with fewer guests if you want to sit down dinner, have your most intimate people with you. So
I agree. Yeah. I think if that sort of like more luxurious experience is something that is important to you and that you want your guests to experience, then you want to be a little bit more ruthless with the guest list.
Right. What would you recommend for couples who aren't creative, don't have time, and are on a limited budget, but want that upscale type wedding?
Like I said, like cutting the guest list, like the smaller your guest list, the more upscale you can make things. Find a great planner who will handle it for you, So I think, especially when working with a professional planner, they will be able to like make those things happen. But you might, like I said, need to pare down that guest list in order to have that more like luxurious style. I think you can check out non-traditional venues. Like one thing that's like really popular here in New York is it's almost like Airbnb, but it's called Pure Space, where you can rent like beautiful loft spaces and things like that for meetings or photo shoots or, small events. And so I've been seeing a lot of really amazing weddings pulled off in these small spaces that are gorgeous that, you look at like New York City hotel ballrooms and you can't even walk in the door for less than 20 grand to do a wedding. So I think, finding those like more unique and like little out of the box venues could be really helpful in that kind of situation too. But especially if you don't have time, you don't consider yourself very creative, I would say keep your guest list small and find a good planner.
There you go. That's very simple.
Yes.
And I think also your planner, which we've talked about, can help you find options that aren't going to cost you too much.
Yeah, absolutely.
They know what they're doing. That's why they're a planner.
Absolutely. I think another area that people like tend to be a little bit like sticker shocked on is florals. Like they are not cheap. The flowers themselves and the time and labor involved in arranging them. And so, thinking about, options for your decor and centerpieces and stuff that aren't super floral heavy can save you a ton of money. So I think that's a good thing to keep in mind too.
Okay, so that's all the questions and topics we have for you right now. But is there anything else you can think of that maybe we might have left off?
If you are interested in DIY, like Make sure you keep your timeline in mind, get your projects done sooner rather than later so you're not scrambling the night before the wedding to print your wedding programs like I was at 2 a.m. Take it from me. And, I would say, I would love to encourage everyone to visit thebudgetsavvybride.com. We have DIY projects. We have free printables. So even if you're not a designer, you can download and customize some of our printables and take advantage of those. And checking out all those real weddings, they're broken down from, $1,000 to $20,000 budgets. And you can see, how other couples were able to pull it off and get inspiration for your own day. And I'm always here to help and inspire and educate. So feel free to reach out.
Absolutely. So where can our listeners reach out to you?
Yeah, they can email me. I'm Jessica at thebudgetsavvybride.com. I'm all over the social medias. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, YouTube, all the places. So
one last time, what's your website?
It's thebudgetsavvybride.com.
And that's with 2 V's, right?
Yes, 2 V's.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was fun.
You obviously love listening to podcasts. Well, have you tried an audiobook? Hi, I'm Kim, and I am an audiobook listener. It's actually my preferred way to, quote unquote, read. And if you haven't tried listening to one yet, go to www.fromringtoveil.com/freebook to get a free audiobook from Audible. I may have just given you your new obsession. Great info.
Yeah, she's always a wealth of information.
Mm-hmm. I love her website.
Yeah.
It's just really pretty and very well laid out.
Right. And I mean, she has different pages where you can go and she has a whole page dedicated to companies that can sell you stuff and that's reasonably priced and good quality things. So
yes,
go check her website out.
Like we said, budgetsavvybride.com, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. I don't want to say the wrong one. I love that she totally suggests a planner, small guest list. I think that's where a lot of people get in trouble.
Right. It's like try to invite too many
everybody.
people. Right.
Yeah.
Your wedding needs to be budget friendly.
Right.
Not 200 people for a sit-down dinner if you only have a limited amount of funds.
Right.
That's not really going to happen.
Mm-hmm. It's just... You just got to stay within your means.
Right.
Really, I mean, truly, that's what you have to do if you want to have the wedding of your dreams.
Right. And plus, she said prioritize. Prioritize your needs and your wants.
Right.
Like, you need a planner.
Yes. At least a day of. Really, truly, guys. We're not lying to you.
It'll make your life so much easier.
Right. Thank you, Jessica, so much for joining us. I really enjoyed that. I know Shannon probably did too.
I did. I really did.
It was fun.
Hopefully one day we'll have her back on.
Yeah. We could go hang out. Maybe I was going to say at Podfest, but she's not a podcaster. She has videos, though. She'll probably be at VidCon. I'm just kidding. That's about it for today. Please make sure you subscribe to the podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts.
If you have questions for us, please email us at info@fromringtoveil.com or hashtag us on Twitter, message us on Facebook.
As you guys saw, we will answer it on the show.
Right. You'll get a little shout out and an answer to your question.
That's right. So until then,
no stress, no worries. Keep calm and listen on. Thank you for listening to our podcast. You can find us on Facebook, From Ring to Veil, on Twitter, @From Ring to Veil, and on our website, fromringtoveil.com.
Music provided by bensound.com.